Hey, we good? Okay, I'm going to call to order the Newburgh School District Board of Directors meeting for February 25th, 2025, and we will start with the flag salute. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any agendas, additions or deletions for the agenda? Okay, then I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Parker do you want to make your comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize to the board and to our budget committee members. When we posted the agenda for the budget committee orientation, it didn't have a start time on it, which made it improper. And we want to make sure that we do these public meetings correctly. So we postponed it tonight, but wanted to kind of explain what happened and how we got there. We'll start working tomorrow with you and the budget committee members to get that rescheduled. It's an orientation. Tonight was going to be mostly about talking about the budget process and what the responsibilities of the budget committee members are and that. But again, just apologize for the confusion there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll move into the consent agenda. As usual, we like to point out the wonderful donations from the Newburgh Rotary Foundation for $3,595.10 for the Newburgh School District resource rooms. And for the Rotary Early Birds, they are contributing $400 to Joanne Austin Elementary Resource Room. Thank you to both of those clubs.
Yeah.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you unanimously. So Dave, it looks like you have the next
Several.
7. No, at least the next 3 items.
So we want to start with a conversation about Rennie Field and what I'm bringing you tonight. When I came on board, there was kind of a conversation that was started about the plans that are happening at Rennie Field. And last spring, the board had already signed an IGA with CPRD to make that happen. There's very exciting plans. There is a turf field and a track that is slated there. They have plans, architectural plans all drawn up. But one of the things that I felt like we needed to, and as I was talking to people coming into the organization, is Rennie Field is also part of our long-range facility plan. And when we create a long-range facility plan, we actually plan out 100 years in advance for every school of when schools kind of hit their useful age and when we're going to look to replace schools and for 100 years. This is slated for a middle school, probably 20 to 30 years from now. It kind of depends on how growth goes, but it's not for a while. But it felt like, and when they drew up the plans for Rennie Field, they have plans for that middle school. But it just feels like we needed some more into this IGA that just talked about how we're going to work together to make sure that our plans for that field and their plans for that field agree. And so I met with CPRD and their board members and some of their representatives, and we kind of talked through this issue of 20 or 30 years from now, I'm certainly not going to be there. And this conversation that we had about how are we going to deal with that isn't anywhere memorialized in this document, the one that was signed last spring. So we proposed an addition to this, and you can see it here, and it just basically says, when we're, and this will go in front of their board too, but it's here tonight is first reading, so we can also make comments or changes, but it basically just says, whereas the district and CPRD recognize the importance of long-term planning and coordination to ensure the best possible use of Rennie Park, Rennie Field. The original IGA was called Rennie Park. We term it, for us, it's Rennie Field, for the benefit of students and community and recreational users. It's identified as a future site of a new middle school in the district's long-range facility plan. And the district and CPRD wish to ensure their respective visions for the use and development of Rennie Field remain aligned over time to best serve the needs of students, athletes, and the broader community. So that's just the part where we memorialize the fact that that's going to most likely be a middle school, and it's also a park that the community will use. The agreement part of it is that as we talked this over with CPRD, I think they really brought forth this idea that we should be collaborating around the long-range facility. So it's we're going to meet at least once every 5 years to share and review the long-range facility plans. The state recommendation for school districts is every 10 years you have you redo your facility plan. So this kind of meets in between. The 10 years felt like it was too long for us to be comparing visions, and 5 feels about right for us. These meetings will serve to ensure clear communication, identify potential areas of alignment, and address anticipated changes. Any proposed modifications to the current or future uses will be discussed collaboratively with the goal of maintaining kind of shared recreational and educational benefits. And so this was just what we came up with to begin to just memorialize the fact that, we both have there's some different purposes for Rennie Field, and we wanted to make sure that was there in the document. So that's what I'm bringing forth tonight, is just to show it. The next meeting, it'll be up for action, and they're doing the same with their board. It is taking it through and taking a look at it. Questions?
Do you know when was the last time we looked at the 10-year plan? Or, every 10 years we're supposed to look at it? Do you
Yeah,
have any
so
sense as to when that was last reviewed?
2017-18, it was actually my last year in the district, was when we initiated a long-range facility plan with Malum Architects. So we have some updating to do here in the coming years. I think one of the first things would probably be some enrollment studies, because of things have changed over the pandemic and just what's happened in the last couple of years. So that would be kind of some of the first starts that we would look at.
Is there any chance we could have a board work session where we go over the long range facilities plan? Because it's been 1.5 years and we have not actually ever seen that, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever looked at the long range facilities plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me take a look and kind of see where it fits in our schedule, but I'd be happy to kind of go back through what some of its points are. Again, it does a lot with enrollment and then forecasting kind of what enrollments will look like, and then making decisions about kind of when buildings will be replaced. With the enrollment change so much, there's a lot of this that's going to be very seriously out of date. But I think it would still be good to come back through and kind of take a look at where its strengths and weaknesses are.
Is that the same as the capital improvement? Can anyone help me out? There's something that we had talked about in finance committee, and
Capital excise tax and those words, right?
yeah, just I feel like Gay Ellen had talked to us about needing to go over our plan to make sure that we were in line with our goals with the budget in terms of our long range plans. I don't know if that's the same idea there, or
I can.
I'll have to
out.
go back and look. I'm sorry, I'm coming with.
But I do think it'd be good to go back and kind of take a look at this plan. Let me kind of figure out when might be a good time for that.
And then, within this agreement, obviously some of the highlighted spots, we would need to start calendaring because I guess it's staff to staff conferences, quarterly written updates due on the 30th. And just an addition is my concern is that they keep referring it to Rennie Park, and why I'm glad it's listed here as Rennie Field. I just have this awful feeling that at some point down the line, we're going to need to put a building on there, and then the community is going to be like, wait, you can't take our park. But wait, it's always been school district property. So the fact that they refer to it as Rennie Park, it really should just stick with Rennie Field or Rennie. But it's a concern. But I won't be here when that happens, so. Yeah. Okay, so really what we just need to do is be prepared to,
If you have questions, get those to me before the next meeting. I mean, I'll take them at the meeting too, but if there's things you need me to run down, I'm happy to do that.
sure, sounds good. Okay,
Okay, I have a couple of calendar items here that I want to run through with you. The first is the adjustment to this year's calendar. So we had on February 13th and 14th, 2 snow days. And we're already missing 8 days of school because of furloughs. So I met with the union, and there's 2 parts to what I'm proposing here. The first part is part of the collaboration with NEA and OSEA is around in their contracts. Basically, the first snow day is kind of a wash, but after that, we can look to make up a day. So of the 2 that we missed, we collaborated and tried to find a furlough day out in the future that we could turn back into, like, we just basically moved the furlough day to that Friday school day. And then we open up another student contact day later in the year. And so that's the first step. And what we're proposing is that we would move the furlough day on June 13th to February 14th, which was our snow day. Then we would basically, June 11th becomes a full day of school. The 12th becomes a half day of school, a half day prep. And then the last day of school for staff would be June 13th. And that gives us one more day of student contact time that we wouldn't have had. With that said, then we began to talk, and I will say that I was struggling, but other folks in the room were trying to be creative to say, how could we get some more student contact time? We don't want to miss 10 days of student contact time. And so what we looked at is changing the way we do conferences on April 10th and 11th. And so what we proposed was the 10th was supposed to, currently on our calendar, the 10th would be a half day of school and a half day of conferences. And then what we would do is make that a full day of school, and then a half day. We take basically the conference that sits on Friday and we move it to Thursday night. And what this would do is it would increase our student contact time by half a day. Spring conferences are often challenging for us to get attendance to. I mean, we value having that time to connect with parents, but when it comes to us trying to be creative to expand some student contact, this just seemed like a good solution for everyone. That would make, under the proposal, it would make April 11th a non-contract day. And so the 10th would be a 12-hour day for folks, and then the 11th would be the non-contract. This wouldn't change any of the other things that are already where graduation is or all of those pieces. It just simply moves the furlough to the snow day and lengthens that last week. And then we kind of tweak April 10th. And this is a first reading tonight, so you have some chance to kind of think about it. And if you have questions, I'm open to those. again, just appreciate our NEA partners to kind of sit down with us and be creative and see what we could do about making it happen, still within the contract, but the rest. And Tammy was, again, very helpful in kind of trying to find something creative moving forward.
I certainly appreciate the effort to get more contact with our students. And I like the creativity in it. I think my concern is that previously we had sort of a chunk of time for evening conferences and a chunk of time for morning conferences, and then to push those both into an evening. It's a lot of work for teachers, and I absolutely appreciate if teachers are willing to do that. I'm wondering if schools or administrators can do anything to, just support those families that are really hard to
Right.
reach out to, and if we can offer teachers any flexibility in any alternative times to meet with those parents.
So we're gonna have to do, I should have mentioned that, conferences are gonna have to look different. Because there's no way that you can do 8 hours of conferences in 4 hours. So we're gonna have to kind of sit down and rethink how we're doing that communication. So we'll sit down with our union folks, so we'll sit down with our administrators and kind of think through. It'll probably look more like we're trying to touch base with folks who we know we need to touch base with, but it might not be that everybody gets contacted, or they get contacted maybe in a more technology way, which is through an email or something to that extent. But we're going to have to look at that. And we're giving up something to get something, because again, it's not. And I'm going to talk about this in next year's proposed calendar, because we made a change in conferences there too, as we talked with folks, but there's some challenges with it. Ready? Yep. Okay. So again, ship me questions if you have them. So then we're giving you the kind of the first draft of next year's calendar. Couple of things. This is a full school year. I know we would have talked about it at the budget committee meeting earlier, but we'll do that down the road. We're starting from a standpoint, when we look at our budget, at a full school year. So there are no furlough days on this. And as we move forward and we have to get our budget aligned, we'll talk about how we're going to make those cuts down the road. But we wanted to start from a stance of kids back in school the whole year long. So that's what we're starting our budgeting process. So that's what's out in front of you. Pretty similar to what you have this year. Just a couple of differences in meeting with the union. At our labor management meeting, we talked some about conferences. I also met with principals, and we talked and specifically the conversation about conferences came up. And there are two things that kind of rose out of those conferences. In the fall, this year we had 1.5 in the fall and 1.5 in the spring. And in the fall is like our most important time to get contact with parents. And specifically from a kind of our younger grades, we don't have enough time. And they would like 2 days and 2 days is what they would like. And I said, yeah, we don't have that we need the student contact time. So we need to think about something that doesn't lower the amount of student contact time. So we came up with this, which is basically 2 days in the fall, where we're doing our first outreach to parents on how kids are doing and the rest. And then we basically have a day in the spring, which is a little bit less time this year, but spring is often our probably lowest attended set of conferences. The other thing that we did is when we moved to trimesters, we had this conference set in April, which the first in trimester schedule, the first week of their trimester is the first week of April. So they were going into conferences in the secondary with having maybe seen the kids twice in class. So we've moved the conference back into February. I think that fits a little better just for one. It's early in the year for us to connect with parents and to try and affect change for kids who are struggling. That feels better than waiting until April anyway. But it's still, there's kind of some issues. This will work for both elementary and at least in our conversation with principals around this. But that's why, and again, I think we're gonna need to have a conversation about like, what does the spring what do they look like? And how are we doing this communication? Again, for elementaries to contact every single parent, it may need to look a little differently than it has in the past. Other than that, we have kind of the first day of school is going to happen right after Labor Day. Many school districts have gone to a pre-Labor Day schedule. We're still not. I think this is one that works better for us. You will notice on our last calendar that F meant furlough. This F means first day of school. So I just wanted to point that out. And then other than that, I think all the rest of the kind of in-between pieces are here. We have another week, 2 weeks before this will come before you again for action. But if you see any problems, let me know. And if you have questions, I can take those.
So I think just, I guess, helped remind people why we kind of talked about April, and is more for targeted, probably more for the high schoolers, that we wanted to make sure there was a contact or a last good push for that last trimester, right? If somebody needs to get contact, maybe the beginning of that last trimester might be the nice, touch point or whatever to help push, get motivated to finish out the year. I don't mind a February, but it's just, I don't know. I think there might need to be more, spitballing on like how to. I know the high school has always good communication. They have the tools. Teachers reach out when they need to reach out, but it's like some of these, I just want to make sure we don't lose focus on some of that, as some of those, especially the juniors and seniors, might need, again, another discussion point or whatever to help push them to finish it up, right?
Agreed.
So
I think there is to be honest, one of the bigger issues we have is with elementary students, because they typically, our secondary students are using our Synergy tools, the Parent View. And so they're getting a lot more instantaneous, weekly kind of feedback. Our elementary students, not all teachers utilize that. Some use Seesaw, some use some other products, but it's one of the big issues that we're kind of beginning to talk about and try and deal with is how do we get more continuous feedback and information to kind of elementary students. That's really the big, I definitely understand what you mean about getting our students to the finish line. That's kind of all we really think about with our high school folks is all the vice principal, all the counselors will be pushing really hard. But you bring up still a concern for us that we'll have to talk about and figure out, because it is, if we move that into February, that'll be good communication then, but we still need to get them to the finish line.
this might be another discussion down the road, or we can talk about more, but you're saying there's part of the communication, there's a lack, or needs improvement or whatever from the younger ages. Is that something that we could, I don't know, and maybe we don't need to be part of that discussion. Maybe that's you and you bring it back to us, but I'm like, why is there such a disparity there than it is in the high school or middle school?
The grades is the big difference, which is secondary teachers are constantly putting in information into their grade books. And it works a little different in the elementary when they're grading on standards. And so there isn't as much push to like get these things into the grade book. And so that's part of the challenge that we have is how are we going to communicate kind of a student's progression on standards. Now, we do that with our progress reports, and teachers will have file folders full of evidence of them meeting the standard, but it doesn't go into a grade book per se at the elementary level. And so that's, I think, the hardest thing is if we're asking teachers to keep a grade book, so we're communicating, but there's really no stuff to go in it like that. That's where a lot of teachers use another product called Seesaw, which they can communicate with their parents with pictures and with artifacts and that kind of thing, where they kind of communicate with parents about what's happening in the classroom. But it's a great product, but it's a separate product from then kind of what we have. And again, as we're talking about budget, this is coming up because of all these things cost money. And so we're analyzing, like, what are we using? What are we not using? And how do we best communicate what's going on in the classroom to our parents? It's a very timely conversation that we're having. So,
Thank you.
I feel like previously when we were in trimesters, we would have 3 conference periods, one for each trimester. I don't know if this is something that just changed once we went to semesters where we had 2, or if that doesn't, it would feel like it would make sense to have one each trimester to deal with each of those blocks of classes, especially for the high school, middle school. But is that something that doesn't happen?
yeah, are you speaking about conferences in each of the trimesters?
Yeah.
It hasn't happened mostly. I mean, it's a great idea. Again, more communication with the parents is good. The problem is it's less student contact time. And so right now that's pretty much with the performance of students on reading, writing, math, science, we need more time in school. And so kind of having more days, more conference just hasn't been our push. I think, again, trying to figure out how we communicate better would be probably our move. Good questions. Okay. And so I'll bring that one back to you all on the next round. And if you have questions or people have feedback, send that to me. I'm happy to get it answered, or at least talk to our partners and see what they're saying about it. Okay. And now I think we're in financials.
I don't know who's more nervous, me or Dave. No, I do want to do a shout out to Gay Ellen and for letting me transition here for the February financials, because it's probably going to be the lowest volume of changes between financial reports that we'll have all year. So that said, I recognize that you guys just got a page full of numbers. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of briefly go over each page and just highlight some things that have changed or things we're looking for. And then if you guys have questions, yeah, we'll go there. Okay. So, like I mentioned, the change between January and February is largely going to be a shift between our encumbrances to actuals. So not a lot of change. We're waiting for the legislature to release numbers for next year. We did get a revised state school fund estimate last Friday, but that wasn't in time for us to get it here to you at the board. But just to highlight what's happened since the last one is we did get our first common school fund payment, which is just above, if you go to the second column over above the first total line, 302,247. And you can see that number, we get 2 of those payments a year. So that's going to be 604,000 at the end of the year. And you can see their estimate 3 columns over was 545,123, which was based on previous year's information. So largely on this page, that's one of the biggest changes. You'll notice at the bottom that our fund balance went down a little bit. Gay Ellen mentioned in our last meeting about looking at encumbrances. And so we have been looking at those over time in the last 3 weeks. And we've had revisions on many sides, but it's resulted in a little drop in that fund balance. We're changing some internal procedures on how we're tracking encumbrances to make it more straightforward and have less opportunity for error. I guess, is one of the things we're doing. And so what that has done is that's increased some of our transportation costs, along with the revision that went into this that Galen did in December was increasing our transportation expenses, which also increases the state school fund for that too. So there's a lot of hydraulics that happen when we make changes to the state school fund that you don't really see here, but they're in the background. So going on to the next page. This one, again, this is largely a change between encumbrances and actuals in this page, but I want you to notice over on the right something that's changed, and that is that we have our over under budget in our 1000s and 2000s that were over budget there. Originally, there was anticipated that we would redistribute the contingency into those areas. However, if you look down at the bottom, we're at a negative 803. So that means that we're going to come in the spring with supplemental budget. So we are over what we have budget there. We have the ability to make changes to affect that, but it's just going to take a board action on that. And I want to take this moment to highlight there's two different things that we manage mainly when we look at numbers, and one is actuals and one is budget. And I was going to describe this in the previous meeting too, but we use budget as our plan. It's the way for us to manage the many activities that a district does. Like I can't put what happens in our year in a single spreadsheet and be able to tell you what happens or who spends what, where, and when. But budget is the mechanism that we use to identify controls for people using money. But on our side, more on the internal side, is that's where we have our cash flows is what we call it. And so that's where we actually look at our actual revenue, our actual expenditures, and what that's going to project out to at the end, which is going to give us where we project our ending fund balance. Those two things are separate. Budget is the plan and how we manage the activities. The cash flows are how we make sure we actually have money in the bank. And so on that side, that's where that 522 really falls in on that first page, is that's where we're projecting based on the actuals. And then this budget is showing us where our projections are off. So that's where the supplemental is going to come in. Okay. So again, on the next page, make sure you guys are all on the one. This is one that says general fund expenditures by object and major function. Again, I'm just going to point out that 803 right there in the middle of the page, there's that. And then you can see in the bottom section where it's by appropriation level or function, instruction support services, just pointing out that you can see there again that we're about 4% over budget in those areas. And so that's where we're going to make those adjustments, reallocate the contingency, and then increase the overall budget. And then under in budget law, we're able to make adjustments to our budget up to 10%. If we go above 10%, then we have to notice and have a hearing. So it's basically like readopting the budget. So that's what we do, but we're at 4% right now here. And then the last page, largely unchanged. Really, the only change you're going to see is that amount received year to date from the state, which is we got another payment from the state school fund. Other than that, these are all the same. Next month, this will all have shifted based on the estimate that we received last Friday. So there'll be an update on the February financials.
Just to confirm, so next time it will be February 28th as the
That's the close
Date.
date, yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That ends the commercial break and back to Dave.
Well, thank you.
Okay. WESD. Last time we brought, so now we're into our action items, correct? Yep, perfect. Last time I brought to you kind of the WSD's local service plan. And in this ESD, there's just strictly, these are the choices that we will have to choose from in about a month and a half. In about a month and a half, we'll go down there with our different department folks and start talking about what services we want to contract with them. But what you have to basically approve is just their plan, what services they are going to offer. All of the districts in the WSD are going to be asked to take action on this. It's pretty straightforward in this ESD, kind of how this runs. And I can take questions about it.
Does anybody have questions for Dave? No, I think we're good. I think we just need a motion. Okay.
I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors adopt resolution 2025-13, 2025 to 2027 local service plan with Willamette Education Service District as presented.
Second.
Any further questions? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, next, the last week, again, we presented the work that we did with the city around the SRO contracts. And just as a reminder, when we ran into the money problems this year, you approved a contract in 2023, basically this same agreement, just with some different pricing. But when the money problems happened last summer, the city stepped in and we suspended the contract, and they paid for both of the SROs and allowed us to kind of catch our breath as we tried to fix it. So I met with the city, kind of walked through the agreement here, and this is what we came up with. And it's basically the agreement is for 2 SROs, of which we will split the cost. So we pay half. And the city pays half. And then we also get to utilize their fueling station at their price. When I calculated this the price fluctuates every day, but when I calculated this in January at that current price with the number of gallons that we used both in buses and our fleet's the wrong word, our number of trucks that facilities drives around. It was right around $40,000 is kind of what the savings we would have saved by using their fueling. So gives you a little bit of an idea that our net cost there is probably closer to 160 or so is kind of what we'll end up paying. But haven't received any questions from folks. And so really it's just now to take action and approve our SROs.
I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public School Board of Directors approve the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Newburgh and Newburgh School District as presented.
Second.
Any further questions? Well, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On transfers.
Transfers. Last week I kind of brought up, it was more a discussion than it was a presentation, just trying to figure out kind of how we wanted to go about doing this. You asked me a couple of questions, which is kind of like, what would be a balanced approach to this? There's 3 options we have. We either say no transfers, in or out, or we say everyone can come in or go out, or we propose some sort of in between. I wanted to give you a little bit of a just some data. This was done by Leslie over the summer, and you've already seen it once, but I just
Right.
wanted to remind you kind of what it's been looking like. This has been the enrollment trends, 10-year trend over the last for districts around us. As you can see, most of the districts are somewhere between 0 and 3%. And that's pretty characteristic of at least what we saw over in Western Washington County among the different districts. Certainly in our district, it's been much larger at minus 18%. So just so you know a little bit about where our enrollment's been going. And then Leslie also kind of tracked students leaving Newburgh in 23-24. And the number here is very large, 1311, this per grade level. So 129 students, which I thought was it's big number. I haven't seen that in other districts necessarily. So then I wanted to kind of give you some information about this year, what we've seen so far and what we're tracking. Transfers in, we've seen 21. Transfers out, we've seen 35. Two of those 35 were students in our district. All the rest were in our district but did not attend any of our schools. So it could have been private or it could have been other places, but it wasn't Newburgh Dundee Public Schools. And then of the transfers out, go back one, just the largest number was 20 headed to Sherwood. Just so you know, kind of where the largest collector of those. And then I just wanted to kind of give you, this was again, information that Leslie put together about like, where are the students going? Again, I think Sherwood is the largest, probably the biggest place that folks go, but we have students who come and go from lots of different places. So with that, I kind of put together this, and I don't think these are these numbers I'm open to. I mean, I chose what numbers I felt like were a balanced approach to this. And basically it would be on the left-hand side are kind of the students we would release. On the right-hand side are the students that we would receive. And I think releasing would be at the high school level, like 10 students. Again, we've got 30, I forget what it was. The whole year long, there's like 30 total K-12. So again, I think this is still a fairly balanced way of looking at this. Middle school 5, elementary 5. And what would happen is we would set a time, and if you pass these numbers, then we would accept applications, both receiving and going out. And if there are more folks who want out, if there's more than 20, then on the last day that we set the time, we would run a lottery. And then we would figure out who goes out by lottery. If you didn't get out, you would still, there's a thing called a hardship that basically says that your parents are active military, or that your childcare is in another district, or there's persistent and documented harassment or bullying going on. And in all three of those cases, then we sign hardship transfer. So that happens even with these numbers. So another example would be families who have students in 2 different districts. I usually sign those because I don't think that's good for the family. So those types of things we work out. But this is kind of, and then on the receiving side, again, we do have quite a few students coming back to the high school as they move through either private schools. And so typically we have kind of a larger number sitting there at the high school, and then just 10 and 10 for students who are coming in. And so this is what I would recommend, but like I said, I don't think there's any magic to those numbers besides just trying to find kind of a balanced place.
2 questions. Those hardships or the like 2 family or 2 kids in 2 different district scenarios, we have a count of like how many would be in this school year that may have done that? I mean, do we have any research of like?
I could find that out.
Okay.
I can tell you I've signed like 2 in my couple of months being here, November. Typically you get most of these in the summer.
Right.
Maybe late spring, summer. And then I get some, things happen with families moving and situations. So I get some of them during the school year, but I don't have that number in front of me, so I could get that for you.
So the 2 you signed or whatever, or whatever you signed in the last 2 months, were any of those hardships, or were they just general?
They're all hardships.
They're all hardships.
Like this transfer process would be done April, May, June of this year. And then from that point on, it's basically all hardships at that point.
Okay. Then what if they're already here? Like, or they've already out of district? Are they grandfathered in? Are we saying even if you've been here the last 2 years and you're in Sherwood and you're coming here, then like they'd have to reply? Like, how do we do?
So if you're in our bounds, you automatically come here. If you're trying to transfer out, then you would start with us with a transfer process
Sure.
and then we would have to say yay or nay.
But there's already people that are already out, either in or out. They're already part of this inter-district transfer policy already.
So they've
Right.
already got a transfer.
Right. So what if they, so they're already, though what I'm trying to say, they're grandfathered in already.
Yes.
So this is only new?
This isn't actually new. We do it every year.
Well, no, but I'm like, would this be, because if you're trying to implement it in the middle of this school year, these would be only new kids, new applicants coming March, April, May?
So.
Or it would be only for 25-26 school
only
year?
25, 26.
Okay.
So we do it in the spring here for the next school year.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then at any other point, it's basically the transfer requests are kind of hardships. And so we look at those different factors.
Gotcha. I guess just a general thing, why would we restrict kids being received into the district?
You don't have to. You
Okay.
know, I was, again, we just kind of, there is a part here where if we, let's say just like losing 100 kids, getting 100 kids creates its own issue
Sure.
of all of a sudden now we've got class size problems and there's more money coming in, but there's kind of a limit there. But again, I won't say there's a lot of, I picked numbers that seem to fit with what we're seeing as trends, but you could make a decision to say, we're going to receive all kids and we're going to put a limit here, or we could say, again, no kids, or you could say all kids.
Can we suggest something that there's a stipulation, like there's no limit unless it causes class size limits hardships for the teachers in the schools? I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm just,
No, my understanding is kind of, once the board set these limits,
Mhm.
like we don't have a lot of flexibility. So it's like, we either got to say all kids, some kids, no kids. And from that place, I don't really have a lot of like the ability to look and say, well, this student has a lot of discipline, so we're not going to okay this transfer. We don't get to look at any of those pieces anymore. So I would say, no, I don't believe that's possible. I think we need to set either no, yes, or some balance of transfers in or out.
I'll just, I like thank you for doing the work. I like these numbers. I think we do need to, especially with the trends, we need to do something. I personally think that a balanced approach is the best like this because, I think, it does kind of involve the whole community in, this is our school district if you live here, and the majority of us are going to live here and have our kids go here. So it kind of has some community investment there too. So, rather than being able to just leave if it's not what you like. So, as well as it also does come with funding that we need to continue to improve our district. So I like it. Thank you for doing that work.
Looking at the receiving numbers, part of me thinks that the elementary school should be higher, just in terms of, ideally we do get an influx of younger kids that helps promote us through the years, since that's where we're lacking. I don't know that we're going to necessarily get more than 10 kids or if that's a problem at all, but it seems like that would be a number that I wouldn't mind to have a little higher. I don't know how that possibly impacts the idea of class sizes and everything else. Obviously, it would depend on what grade they're coming into at this point, but just something I was thinking.
So again, if you want to do that, I think you make a motion and change those numbers from what I've got here, and then we go from there. But that's the discussion that I think.
Yeah, and I guess before I make a motion, that I'd be interested to hear if anybody else has thoughts on those numbers.
In theory, I would agree, but I would actually want to go back to you. Are these like the most that you think, like, would there be any kind of infrastructure problem if we said 20 for elementary? I just want to make sure that before we just change numbers, that in case it happens that we're not all of a sudden have kindergarten classes that have, 60 kids to a teacher. So I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we don't cause an issue when we mean well. So
And again, all of these students are coming from outside of our boundaries and coming in. And again, we do have students where there's a reason for this. And so it's very appropriate. And but I also want to say that the biggest challenge for us, I think, is how do we improve our enrollment inside of our boundaries, which is where we need to probably grow our enrollment the most. I still think these numbers are actually fair or good for the number of kids who might be coming from Sherwood to or from McMinnville to Newburgh. And we have folks, like I said, I think the numbers was 21 or 24 students are transferring from outside our district into our district to for whatever reason.
another question with that. So if with these numbers, say they're, I'm trying to think how to phrase it. So say there's 10 kids over in Sherwood that live here, previously transferred, but want to transfer back in. Would that affect these numbers? Or if they're already living in our bounds, would that just be an automatic, you can come back in?
If they're living inside of our boundaries, they have rights to come to their neighborhood school.
Even if they've previously transferred out,
Right.
we wouldn't stop
Yeah.
that. Okay.
There's also like other things that happen with transfers, or like kids who leave in the middle of the year. Typically, we'll just maintain unless the parents want them to go to the new school. Like especially like juniors and seniors in high school who move, will typically hold their attendance here because of there's other things that we need to think about. So all of this gets done with people kind of trying to figure out what's best for the kid and the family.
One other thing I could say we could do too, just to throw out another idea, is go with these numbers now and then revisit this in a year if if you come to us and say, actually, yeah, we got an influx and we need to adjust these, but if these are holding true, this could be a great starting point.
Yep. My last clarifying question. I'm assuming there's some out of district teachers that live out of district. They come here, they want to bring their children. Are those part of these numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there would be, for whether they work for us or whether they're just parents in another community, these count for all of those.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we know how many other districts around us have these parameters in place?
Well, I know one district.
Okay. I guess I want to make sure that this isn't an outlandish thing. I don't love the idea of, I would like our schools to be better in a way that people don't want to leave or that people want to come here. I don't love the idea of, we have this problem, so stay because we're telling you to, but we need it. Obviously, we need that stability. So I'm for this. It just, it's in my head. It's just a weird push of I want people to want to be here.
Agreed. So two things. Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're working on right now, is to bring back sustainability and some kind of consistency to the way we approach education so that people want to be here. But I'll also tell you, in my former district, we did this. We actually broke it out by grade level because I had grade levels that were, class sizes were high. And so we actually only allowed transfers in specific grade levels and schools. So it can get even more granular, and this is a common thing. Currently, right now, again, we were way overstaffed last year, and so class sizes were low. But as we begin to get back into a normal place, we're going to start hitting some places where our average class size is beginning to bump up against like what we really want in our classrooms. And we are going to have to be concerned about transfers and enrollments. And currently right now, we have some space in especially elementary classrooms that we would like to get more folks in. But soon as this begins to normalize, we will be running up against some of these boundaries and some of these class size issues. And this would become more important to us.
I move that the Newburgh School District Board of Directors approve the slots for entrance and exit of inner district transfer students as were recommended for the 25-26 school year.
Second.
Any further questions? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so then we go to the monthly count. I don't know.
So that's just an informational item.
Okay.
And so we've been caught up in some reports to the state, but I still have some changes to this report that I'll bring to you that will hopefully make it a little bit easier to read and see some change happening. Tanya and I've done some discussing, but again, it's there for you again, just to kind of take a look at class sizes, be able to look at where we're trending. The information I'm trying to get for you is to kind of put in a reference back to what we budgeted class size wise, so you can see what our actual total enrollment is, what we were budgeted against, so that we can begin to look for issues in future years.
Could I possibly make one request to show the whole first grade count and the whole second grade count? Rather than trying to parse out if it's half and half and. Thank
Yep.
you.
Also in some of these reports, and this could be financials too. Now this is a lot of yellow header, maybe change the header color and then highlight cells that have changed from last report to this report. So we can pinpoint what like big variances are or what the variances are. And it can, again, kind of go maybe back to the financials too, of, okay, our, appropriations or whatever, this changed or this needs to be changed. So you can help call it out. I mean, I know you're verbally calling it out, but just visually it helps.
What we talked
Yeah,
about with
so-
Tanya was to basically highlight areas of under and over.
Sure.
So just to draw your eye to quickly, when a class size is at 28 at the K3 levels would be something that my eye would be drawn to. These numbers that are 16 and 17, those are low still. Our
Mhm.
class size K3, I just kind of did some calculations on it. We're about 20-1. That's low still. We have some work to do there. And especially it's going to be hard because at some grade levels, we can't go lower than what like the FTE that we've got allocated to that grade level. You can't go lower. Like, let's say you had two sections and they were like 20 or 18 and 18. Well, those are low, but if I go to one section, they're now 36 and that's impossible. So I have to have two sections there and that class size is going to end up being low. So those are some issues as we look into next year. We've got to start trying to figure out. The part of the way that you deal with that is you create a blend, but blends, especially when you're trying to do explicit phonics, it's hard. Our teachers have found ways to do that, but there's some real challenges there. So as Tammy and I are sitting down tomorrow morning to kind of do some more looking at staffing, and this will be one of the things that we're looking at is kind of areas in our buildings where we can't go lower. And so how do we begin to deal with some of that? So there's a lot of tough staffing questions coming up around this. So.
I know maybe there wasn't good records being kept over the last several years. I don't know, but is there a way we can kind of look at this, like even maybe a 5-year trend and see if there's like certain schools and do they correlate to like, is there new developments of houses in those areas or drawing, more kids there and try to maybe correlates. I know there's been some discussions, very slight, kind of like just in the hallways or whatever, talking about like, do we need this is a long-term solution, but do we need to like relook at, rezoning?
So
And so I'm just trying to understand, some of that data might help, like, okay, we're overpopulated in Edwards and Maple Rush. Well, it's because that's all the growth's on this side of town. It's like, can we reslice that to be more finite and then help put it over in Joy and Austin or wherever, right? So,
we absolutely need to look at some boundaries.
okay.
That is something. Boundaries are a really challenging committee process to run, but it is something that we need to take a look at and how we balance some of the small schools with some of our large schools. Yes, we need to do this. I don't know when. I mean, I think we're looking at next year, and these usually run, the ones I've run in Hillsborough, I've been on a couple of these processes, and they're like 3 and 4 month. It's a big, and it impacts a lot of folks. So you gotta do it right and run a strong committee. But I do think this is something that we need to kind of take a look at. The question for me as an interim, and we also need to kind of have a conversation about what my timeline is and when so there's some, yes,
Yeah.
we absolutely need to kind of take a look at this.
Yeah, my next question was gonna be, is that you? Because if you're only here, say 2 years, and like, is it fair for you to do this and then like, and walk out? I'm not saying walk out is a bad way. It's just like you're done what you need to do, then your due diligence of what we've asked you to do.
Right.
And then upon that, like in the change, oh, we're going to do this. It's going to be at the end of 26, 27. New person comes in, voila, you have to deal with the ramifications of it.
Yeah.
So
I think it would be good for us to talk about these timelines and figure out what that's going to look like and how we provide some sustainability to the district and when's the right time. So, but absolutely, this district needs to look at some boundaries. So.
okay.
Okay, so that is it for most of the meeting. Some reminders that we have applications for Zone 1 is open. Continue with the academic calendar, staff renewals, and May elections. And our next board meeting is March 11th, but we will hear about trying to squeeze in a budget orientation before then, hopefully.
Are we thinking of doing like we were trying to do tonight and do like an hour ahead of a board meeting, or?
I'd love to do that if that's kind of where, I think that's where we need to go, because we do need to get this orientation. And we're, once we get into the budget cycle piece, it's going to get really busy. We're going to start packing lots of stuff into it. So I'd love to find a way to get this done.
Maybe we do that. Yeah, at the March 11th one, if possible. And then if there is an executive session, because I know there are some other things we need to discuss, but at some point, but that could be done around a work session since those go a little faster. So
Isn't March 11th, we're looking at applicants for the vacancy? So that could be time consuming, just depending on how many applicants we have, interviews, making that selection.
We'll work with Dave and
Exactly.
on
We'll
that.
figure out
Yeah.
how to get this.
The only other thing I can think of, and I don't necessarily want to add more on, we're looking at a pretty short finance committee meeting next Wednesday.
Okay.
But then that means that impacts this part of the board, not the necessarily the budget committee people. I mean, they're impacted either way, but I don't know, something to think about.
Thank you.
We'll figure it out. Thank you. And the meeting is adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming.